No sound.
Check.
Hello? Oh, hello. Hi, everyone. I'll wait for everyone to sit down. Good afternoon. My name is Stacey Wilson Hunt. I'm from The Hollywood Reporter in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, that scary, scary place. It's so nice to be here with Josh Pate. Please welcome to our makeshift stage, Josh Pate. Good.
Thank you.
I just met your wife, by the way. She's really lovely.
Thanks.
Yes, well done. So, with any conversation about career trajectory, I always want to start with early artistic influences. So I would love to know, growing up you're from North Carolina.
Yep.
What were your earliest touchstones in terms of films or shows or icons or artists themselves who really stuck with you and you saw their work and you thought, oh my God, I want to do that too?
Well, I guess I grew up in a small town, so I wasn't going to see independent movies and foreign movies. So it was Raiders, which came out when I was 12 years old, and I think I snuck in 15 times. But I loved.
You must be excited about the new indie coming up.
It looks a little.
It's gotten mixed reviews, but we'll still see it because we love Indiana Jones.
Absolutely. But no, it was big pop filmmaking. Spielberg was really the one, and then. Later on, I started watching a lot of Kurosawa movies.
That's a departure from Spielberg.
It was, but that was once I started really getting interested in films, and Hitchcock, Spielberg, and Kurosawa were the three. But I often tell people to pick a director and watch all of their movies rather than go all around like a great director. You don't need a lot of books, you just need 5 really great books and just read them over and over again. That's kind of how I approach studying.
Cheaper than film school, too.
Cheaper than film school.
And, I've spoken to a few people about this, namely, most recently, Rami Malek, about what it's like to be a twin. How does that affect your view on the world and also the way you saw yourself as a young person?
I guess it was you don't know another reality, but it's been helpful in my career because I'm primarily I do the writing for Outer Banks and my brother does the directing. So it was kind of a useful,
built-in partnership.
Exactly. Right. So he's like, you come up with the idea and I'll make it, kind of a thing.
Like the Coen brothers.
Yeah, but I think a little bit in some ways being a twin, you have to differentiate your personality because your mom's dressing you in the same sailor suits your whole life.
I'm so sorry.
Which as soon as I could talk, I was like, no more sailor suits. So.
And how would you say you and your brother are different in terms of your personalities or the way you approach your work?
So when we first got going in Hollywood, we were both writing and both directing. My brother's his personality's better suited for the endless meetings that directing is, where I like to kind of just Geppetto in the basement by myself. So
I've never heard Geppetto as a verb.
Yeah. So I like making puppets. And so, but I realized I directed a Friday Night Lights instead of my brother, and he got asked back, and I didn't. And I realized after I got out of the fetal position, I realized Hollywood's so competitive that I wasn't smart enough to dominate writing and directing.
How dare you?
Yeah, so I was like, I'm going to stick, and I wanted to be a novelist first, and realized I was going to starve to death. And my brother was like, you can actually get paid for writing in Hollywood, so.
So you were more the writerly, he's the more kind of Hollywood industry guy, the glad hander, the meetings guy.
Yes.
Okay, that's a good combination, actually.
Absolutely, so, yeah.
And what was the first thing that you made on your own that inspired you? Something you wrote, maybe a short film that gave you hope that there was a future for you in this business?
We had a crazy story. I can tell you a little bit about our first thing. We made this, I had written a script called The Grave, with him, and we were living down in North Carolina in Wilmington, and the actor Dennis Hopper lived there,
Amazing.
Apocalypse Now, and we knew where his house was, and so we got a big bed sheet and spray painted Dennis, we have a script, call us, and hung it on the telephone pole across the street from his house. And so about 2 months later, I'm watching a basketball game, phone rings. Hello, is Josh there? Hey, it's Dennis. You want to bring your script and watch the game with me? And so, as you guys know, Dennis Hopper is such a maniac on screen.
I was going to say, he probably liked your approach. This is very Dennis Hopper-ish.
Yes, yeah. And so, but I was terrified to go to his house. Is he going to stab me? Or, And it was unnerving because he was just super polite. And he gave our script to his agent. The agent liked it. We ended up starting doing the foreign sales game, and at that point we had actually come out to LA, and we had met some young actors, and they wanted name actors so we could sell Germany or whatever. And we had met some young people that hadn't really done anything, and they're like, well, what? I'm friends with this guy named Matt McConaughey and Ashley Judd. Could they be in it? And they were like, who in the hell is Matthew McConaughey? Because he said they turned down McConaughey because he was unknown.
He's
at that
also
point.
big in Europe too.
Yeah,
He
I mean, this
helps,
was so we ended up getting it with Gabrielle Anwar and Craig Sheffer. Craig Sheffer had just been in like A River Runs Through It. So they asked us, well, who's going to direct it? And we're like, oh, we're going to direct it. And we're like, can you direct it? We've done so many short films. We'd never done anything. So when we actually got to the set where we had conned people to give us $1 million to make the movie, we had never been on a film set.
Oh my God.
And so my brother goes, do you know what these fucking trucks are for?
So they required no evidence of skill in giving you this money.
Once they got the actors in, it was in the black, so they let us do it, and we screwed it up. You make every mistake, right? So, but it ended up getting into like a midnight screening at Sundance, and it's the first.
That's an amazing origin story, Josh.
You gotta hustle.
You have to hustle and get creative, and bless Dennis Hopper's heart for helping you.
That's
he
really
was
special. He was a great guy.
He was a very good guy, very artistic, and
just cool.
Just very cool.
Yeah.
He's the ultimate. So obviously one of the biggest impediments to a career in Hollywood is finding representation.
Yep.
People to read your work and then help you get jobs.
Yeah.
So how did you go about doing that? You're repped by WME now?
No, okay. I left WME.
Oh, you did?
I just have a manager now. Okay. I don't know. Do agents really help you get jobs?
That's not a question for me to answer, Josh.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
I've never had an agent get me a job. Or very rarely. The big agencies, I'm kind of skeptical of. We'll help you plug actors into your movie. I was with a big agency for 20 years. 0 actors were plugged into 0 movies. So, I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical of the big agencies.
It's rightfully
I think it's up to
so,
you.
yeah.
Really?
But I think a lot of people now are choosing, if they're going to have a rep, to have a manager instead of an agent, because at least the manager is a little bit more incentivized to help you create an arc for yourself.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. And they can help you get IP and stuff. So, but I wouldn't rely on anybody to save you in Hollywood, because no one's coming to save you.
No one is going. Hollywood needs saving in general
Yes,
at this point, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
So Outer Banks, congratulations. You're about to shoot season 4, is that correct? Amazing to have 4 seasons of a show on Netflix. That is an enormous accomplishment, so congratulations.
Thanks.
Yes, let's applaud that. I would love to know, and I'm sure things have changed wildly just in the 5 or so years since you started pitching, but what was your pitch process like for this show, and how did you sell this show? What really sold it to Netflix?
So I could talk for like 45 minutes about how to pitch, because I actually think for young filmmakers it's probably the most important skill, is because it's an actual shot on goal, right? Like it's you're actually taking a shot that can get you money. So I've pitched a lot of different ways. Most of them have failed, but I remember I script it all now. I'll spend 6 weeks working on that 30-minute meeting, and it's all scripted. I usually go in with more than one person, because no one wants to hear one person talk for 30 minutes. It's
So like a producer, fellow producer? Or something?
or like, well, in the case of Outer Banks, it was my brother and the guy that I write the show with. So we were taking turns, but it's totally scripted. It's 30 minutes, and then at the end, we usually do some kind of visual presentation. We'll shoot a trailer, but I don't. They'll try to hook you up in Hollywood with like, the only way to get your project made is to hook up with a giant 800-pound gorilla producer. All that's going to do is get you have a lot of stupid meetings and more people giving you notes. Right. So after a while in my career in Hollywood, I was like, and I realized the agencies were feeding the younger writers to their big producer clients. And so you're just kind of like cannon fodder to give. So we went in with Outer Banks. At that point, I was like, I want the skinniest possible. And so we just went in with the 3 of us. No, I don't like the agents to come. because I want it to be super focused and not like this giant pitch meeting. So we had our pitch ready, and we had a trailer shot. And the guy that we pitched to was from South Carolina.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the key.
And he was like, I know what you're talking about. So that was really lucky.
So
Absolutely.
that actually begs a very important issue, which is when people are in the room who resonate with your content, and that has for so long been a certain type of person.
Yeah.
And that's why just now we're starting to see a more diversity of people in the rooms who are like, oh, I'm South Asian, this story resonates with me. I'm black, I'm gay. So it's interesting that that particular moment, had that executive not heard your pitch, you know, what if it were someone else?
We would have gotten hosed, probably. Honestly.
We could have maybe sold it somewhere else, or maybe
Yeah, we
done,
had
done
some
a
other
feature.
offers, but that was a huge push, was that the person I was talking to could connect to what I was saying on a personal level.
That's so huge.
Yeah, for
And I'm
sure.
glad that happened for you.
Thank you.
So your show premiered, I had forgotten this timing and now I'm remembering, April 2020, which, as we recall, was a month into a certain global event. What was it like to have your content being seen by people who were literally housebound and had nothing else to do and maybe were more engaged with the show than they may have
Absolutely,
been?
it was a tailwind. The coolest part about it was there's very few shows, even on Netflix, that are original IP. And so we had original IP with no stars. So you're starting at with zero momentum. And so to watch the show climb and then hit, it was kind of started out okay, and then it kept climbing and climbing and climbing. So it was just, and it's the first thing I've ever had in 30 years that would just totally worked. And it is a game changer when something works. You do get a lot more opportunities. So while everyone was miserable in the pandemic, I was having a lot of fun because my show was going to
It was a time of your
doing
life.
really well, yeah.
Now,
So,
was Netflix sharing, they obviously are famously don't share numbers, but were they hinting to you at how many
we
people
just
were
saw
watching?
the top 10 every day.
Okay. That's so amazing.
So, yeah, it was mostly fun. Absolutely.
And this was after Stranger Things, obviously, which was star-studded and had Winona and David Harbour. So
Yeah.
the fact that you were kind of on the heels of that juggernaut, but without stars, were you kind of like, ha-ha, Duffer Brothers, we made our show without stars?
I was mostly just happy for the cast. They were all terrified. They were all working at Cheesecake Factory and Foot Locker, and they all cried at the end of the first season because they were like, I had $17 in my bank account, and they were terrified.
Terrified of the show not being successful?
Well, and also just hey, you're going to be in the show. This is your chance. If you screw it up, they're going to kick you out.
Right.
So, and now that's changed because they're on different trajectories now.
They're
But I was
doing
mostly
okay.
just happy for them. So.
It's so great, and to see kind of an undiscovered pool of talent, to sort of what Kevin Williamson had with Dawson's Creek.
Yeah.
I had never heard of any of those kids before, and then within a couple years, they were huge stars.
I used to take casting as a writer. I probably underestimated the importance of casting, and I'd screwed a couple TV shows up by kind of not going insane. But it's like a binary decision that can completely sink your ship. Where if you work on a script for a really long time, casting is this one thing where it's just this one momentary decision. Okay, that person that can literally make or break your entire project. So with Outer Banks, we went 4x harder on casting than we ever had. I think we broke the casting director's record by 300 auditions. Looking under every rock.
All over America?
All over. And then, you see someone and you're like, oh, it's a 7. And you're like, oh, it's pretty good, let's go. Just keep going and do twice as many auditions again. Casting's kind of like everything.
It's a real art form.
It really is.
It really, and only just now being appreciated, I have to say.
Absolutely.
Those poor casting directors, they work so hard.
Yeah.
We were talking backstage a little bit about the current political climate in America, and I would mostly just say cultural climate, really, because that's really what it is. And you said that you like to stay apolitical in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And describe what that means to you, because I think it is a secret to success, as long as the show is also naturally inclusive and telling true stories.
Yeah.
And what is that line? Because obviously, with the success of Yellowstone and other shows that have more of a broad appeal, what lessons can we take away from those shows, but also how can we expand on good storytelling in concert with that?
I just think about telling an entertaining story. This is like a big YA show. It's trying to be popular. The more, I guess, political you get, you're just risking losing audience. And I kind of just try to duck all that stuff. The only thing that I think a lot of the stuff, there is a class conflict in the show.
Which,
I
by
think,
the way, is a huge piece of DEI to see that represented.
Absolutely. And so the great thing about class conflict is people on both sides of the political spectrum, everybody cheers for the poor kids.
Yeah.
And so it was a way to kind of touch on some issues without pissing people off.
Right.
And but again, my focus is adventure, entertainment. I'm thinking about popcorn. I'm not thinking about a message.
But you have an inclusive cast because
Yep.
that's the world where you're from is a diverse world.
Correct.
So you didn't have to sort of plug people in. These were naturally occurring characters in this world.
And I'm interested in organically diverse stories, so that was just kind of a natural fit. It wasn't like any kind of an agenda. It just felt real.
No, and it does feel very. I mean, the show is sort of fantastical, but it does feel like a real world, and I think that's very cool.
Yep.
I've talked to a lot of showrunners over the years who liken becoming a showrunner to you're just like a writer in a room and suddenly you're a CEO overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Writers are not generally trained in money, managing budgets, etc.
Artists and money are not great
they've
together.
been sort of not totally connected over the decades. What is a part of that job that for you had the sharpest learning curve or that you wish you could delegate?
Well, when I did a show at ABC called Blood and Oil, it was changed, and that was kind of a traditional structure with the writer's room and all those issues that you're talking about. Like, I was just Geppettoing in the basement, and now like 8 people are looking at you, and you're trying to coordinate like a writer's room, and I was terrible at it. They basically fired me, and so. But then, so with Outer Banks, I was like, I'm not going to put myself in that situation again, and so. Shannon and I basically write all the episodes. We bring some people in to help us with some ideas. But I think the trick is, like, if it doesn't work for you, change it and set up a system that works for you.
Or ask for help.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Outer Banks has, like, an untraditional structure for TV and the way the decisions are made. But it's just organic to the people involved. So I think that's the trick is, like, make it work for you. But the usual TV stuff of, like, sitting in a room in front of 12 people in a writer's room, I'm like, I can't stand. I don't know how you write with 12 people. I honestly don't.
Well, and on that note, we were talking again backstage about the strike and everything that's at stake and sort of what is a writer's room? How many people do you need to tell a story? I mean, these are all things we're reckoning with.
Yep.
You're a WGA member. Obviously, you can't speak for all your peers. What is one thing that you hope will come out of the strike? Obviously, pay equity being the obvious one, but what is the larger sort of reconciliation moment that we're going through?
I just hope people can, that it's not a gig, you know, that people can have a decent career and have a nice house and a good place to send, a school to send their kids to. I mean, kind of just basic middle class stuff. Right. So that's what I'd like to see. And I'd like to see more companies. I'm really worried about the concentration of the industry.
Yeah. The conglomeration of them. Yeah.
Anisha and I were talking about the other day, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I took a show out and we pitched 25 places. Now there's like 4. And if you piss off that one executive at one, now you got 3. And so...
and also Disney has 10 brands underneath. So if you piss
how
off
they
someone at Hulu, they may not want you to pitch over
how
at
they
FX.
let Disney buy Fox, I have no idea. That was a terrible thing for the industry.
Yeah, it's not good.
And I think it's gonna get worse, unfortunately. So antitrust in the entertainment business needs to happen.
Yeah. Agreed. And in terms of your future with Outer Banks, how many seasons are you envisioning or that you feel like you can actually realistically generate? And what would you like to do after the show?
I think we'll go a couple more. The actors will be like 43.
It'll be Outer Banks.
Outer Banks.
Yeah.
But we've talked about, we sold, they want us to look into a prequel of like I can't talk that much about it, but they're kind of a spin-off, working with Jason on.
Jason is the man of the hour today. Jason, have you been pitched 100 projects this week? You better be careful. Okay.
But we have, my brothers put together another show that we raised the money for privately and are taking it out. It's such a crappy time in the industry.
It's a really rough time. If we can get frank for a minute, it's really, really, really difficult.
I think it's as bad since like the Wasserman 50s, you know?
Yeah. I think, right, relatively speaking, yeah.
Yeah. So, because it's vertically aligned, they own distribution and production, which the Supreme Court split, and then streaming put back together. So now they have total power over performance and pay have been, that link has been severed.
Right.
So it's a mess.
It is a mess.
Yeah.
But good luck to everyone in this room on their
Yeah.
future endeavors. Just kidding. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. So I'd love to open it up to some questions. This man has a lot of wisdom to share. Okay, we'll wait for you to get a mic, so we'll make sure to have everyone hear you. And by the way, if anyone does want to ask me any questions about the insane hellscape that is media in Hollywood, feel free. I'm happy to share as well.
Yeah, so I was just kind of wondering, you're going into season 4, and I guess my question is, in that writer room, how do you guys go about, creating the next storyline and going into the character development for the next season?
Well, at the beginning of the season, we'll write a 30-page Bible, just as kind of a battle plan for okay, we're going to end up here. And that'll just kind of organize things. As we write the scripts, it will change a lot. And you go back at the end of the year and you read the Bible and you're like, wow, maybe 30% of it lived. But at least kind of organizes it a little bit. And then it's a weird process between me and Shannon. It's kind of brick by brick. We have that kind of loose idea okay, we're going somewhere in Africa to get a treasure, but that's basically all we know. And maybe there's a couple ideas about a character that we want to emphasize. But then it's it's really tactile. We don't talk that much or whiteboard that much. We write and we're like, okay, we're good to page 4. Page 5 sucks. We're like, well, let's fix page 5. Okay, we're good to page 5. And so you're kind of living in constant terror that you're not going to land the plane at the end of the season, which I've learned is part of the creative process. Instead of trying to get to a place where you're not terrified, channel the terror, because it's just not going away anyway. And you just kind of build the plane as you're flying it, and then you do rewrites, and you try to, as the show gets more robust, you have more to draw from. In some ways, it gets easier the more episodes that you have stacked up, because you have more. But it's kind of, you wander around in the fog a lot. For each script, we'll probably, for each 55-page script, we'll probably write 250 pages. So.
And Shannon Burke, who's a man, by the way, I recently learned, he's a novelist by training. So how does that impact the way you write, which is pretty non-traditional as compared to most writers' rooms?
Yeah, he has a great sense of long narrative. So in episodic TV, a novelist, and episodic TV is really good. So Shannon will come up to me and say hey, we need to lay an Easter egg here because we're going to do this thing in 4 episodes where so-and-so has a nervous breakdown. We need to foreshadow this here. So he has a great 30,000-foot sense of the story. And then, if it's a big set piece where it's almost in real time, where you're doing 15 minutes of film in 15 minutes of real life, stuff like that, that's kind of my specialty. So I like writing sequences like that. But
Very cool. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
good question. Gentleman on the right over here, right behind you.
Hi, how do you navigate the fine line between collaboration and constructive criticism and self-trust in your writing?
Well, on collaboration, pick really good collaborators. It's such a team sport. The whole auteur theory is such bullshit. It's kind of an ego thing. So I'm always collecting. Outer Banks has the best team we've ever put together, and by team it's DP, hair, makeup, props, stunts, in addition to the actors. So in all the years my brother and I have worked, we've made friends with a lot of great collaborators. So that's one big piece. Constructive criticism, it's almost like a collaborator question. I trust criticism from other writers. I have a circle of friends, and a lot of your friends or people that care about you won't tell you the truth. They'll be like, oh, we really like it. That's unhelpful.
Who do you trust to tell you the truth?
Well, my Shannon, of course, and then there's 4 or 5 writer friends that when I have something new, I'll send it around. What do you think? And the studio notes, which is everybody gets their backup on studio notes. I used to be super hostile when I was earlier in my career. I couldn't stand the suits giving me notes. But Netflix has been really great because they write all their notes, so it's written, so there's accountability. And they're usually just, we don't understand this, they're questions. So, and they're not prescriptive in any way. If a studio person started giving me prescriptive notes, I was like, I don't want to work at the studio anymore. It's like, you can identify the problem, but let me solve it. And I'll take suggestions, but sometimes studios will be like, here's the problem, okay, it's a problem, and here's how you have to fix it. Then you're screwed, basically, as an artist. And I would push back really hard whenever that comes down the pipe. And they'll call you difficult, but like, it's better than making something shitty. And you at least want to die on with your own stuff, not their stuff, you know? Anyway, does that help? Yeah.
So essentially, work with people who have your same taste and think everything you do is great.
And you trust.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. You want a lot of yes people around, definitely.
Exactly, 100%. Helps the final product.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question? One? Front table.
Sorry, it's louder than I expected. I was just wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit more about the pitching process in terms of staying in contact with, I guess, people at networks. And you were saying you didn't really like as much the agent game, but then how important is it to be, I guess, like the networking and all that kind of stuff? And do you email them yourself and go in, or I'm just curious about how all that goes down.
I guess the agents, they do help you get meetings. So my agent will, and you get to a certain point where you're like, don't put me in the room unless there's an actual buyer in the room. I get mad. And even when you're younger, when you get a pitch meeting, if they make you go through 4 levels, you're going to die on one of those levels, even if you've got like the greatest thing ever. So like, you want a one-shot binary. Is there a decision maker in the room that can buy it? So.
And do you think it's still good to do virtual meetings or only in person?
I think people are cool with it now after COVID. It's a lot easier because, I script my pitches. So when you're on a Zoom pitch,
you can read it.
It's like a teleprompter, Otherwise, you have to be off book and memorize, and it's horrible. Although, I've gotten to where we had a meeting about like a sequel, and heavy meeting, heaviest room I was ever in, Sarandos, Bella.
Whoa,
like
they brought in the big guns.
5 of the top 6 at Netflix. And we had our little pitch ready to go, and I had been Zooming, and so I was like, holy shit, do we have to be off book? Because we were in person. And so we just went in there and said, look, we don't want to waste your time. We have something very specific we want to say. If I have to read it, I have to read it. But like, just be real and say like, I want in 30 minutes, because you guys are busy and I have something very specific I want to talk to you about. And so here it is in 30 minutes. And if I have to look at my notes, I have to look at my fucking notes. Just keep it real and just get your thing across.
Right. So if you have to read your notes, it's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
But really prepare for the pitches, 6 weeks to get ready.
It's a performance too.
When you only get one chance, and that is it. And you can't get on the field unless you get through that. So they're super, and your competition is ferocious. You'll go into Netflix and like you'll see like, was that Steven Soderbergh just coming out of the same room that I'm going to pitch the same person? Like, it's big boy football. You better be ready, because your competition is ferocious.
How do you handle, and I just have pitched my own projects in the past too, and you either get ghosted or no feedback or just pass. They'll just say pass.
Yeah.
Do you go back just because like self-flagellation and say, why? What didn't you like about this? Just to get more context, or you just let it go and move on?
I usually just let it go. I think there's like categories of stuff that they're looking for. Netflix passed on something that we were interested in, and it was a categorical pass. It was a music show, and they've gone through the windshield on like 4 music shows. And then it's specific to, they're such an international brand that it's hard for a music show to go worldwide because each country has its own musical vibe. So a lot of times you get kind of categorical passes, which there's nothing you can do about really. I know you're dead in the pitch meeting when they go, oh my God, you told that so well. You're like, oh fuck, we're dead.
So if you get complimented, that's bad news.
If you get
in the
complimented at
meeting.
the end, you're dead. And but it's so strange. Sometimes you walk out and you're like, that was a dud, and they buy it. And other times they're like, they loved it. It's really hard to tell. So the main thing is put a lot of shots on goal. If you're not shooting on goal, you're not scoring, you're not getting in. So you got to get in those rooms, no matter how many bed sheets you have to hang on. You got to get in those rooms. Otherwise, it's not a shot on goal.
So
you
for
know?
these folks, it'd be, Ted, I have a script for you, stand outside of Netflix. And hopefully that Ted's looking out the window.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, you know, especially when you're young, too, you can get away with being, like, really aggressive and people think it's adorable.
At what age does it stop being adorable?
I think about 35.
Ooh, you guys better
Yeah.
get going.
So,
That's great. No, that is actually great intel. And a lot of people no one ever teaches these aspects. The pitching process is really brutal.
It's brutal.
But it's a performance. And I think if people think of it that way, it helps.
and having a visual component, too, that they weren't expecting. You know, like you show them a trailer at the end or a sizzle that you've shot. I think that really helps. And then you can put some music on it. Like if I showed you the sizzle for Outer Banks, it feels exactly like the show.
Really?
And it was shot with like a bunch of random teenagers and
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's how they shot that too.
Yeah.
They shot a proof of concept, and this is years and years ago, but
Yeah.
longest running comedy in television.
it helps.
Yeah.
You know?
That's great. Any other
For sure.
questions? Right in front here.
Hey, so you've done a lot of work in like thriller and sci-fi space, and those are two genres where female filmmakers just really have an especially hard time breaking in, it feels like. So I was curious if you had any thoughts or like advice around that, or if you know of any fellowships or opportunities that specifically women who are trying to break into those genres can take.
You know, I don't know about any specific fellowships and stuff, but I think like more than anything, it comes down to the story. The thing that opens the door is a really good story. And there's maybe you've got a little extra weight in your pack, but like I've never seen anybody be like, that's a great story, but we're not doing it because of the people involved. I think it comes down to the story. What busts open the door is you're 120 pages away from the thing that will bust open the door. It's the script. You know, they read a great script, and if it's good enough, doors will open. I mean, that's harsh, kind of Darwinian logic, but it's the truth. You know, like a great hot sci-fi script story, it'll work. So just believe in your story, and that's where I would focus on. You know, I mean, obviously, there's been some barriers in the past, and we're glad they're going away. But just stick to the knitting of the story and something that you're burning up to tell, and that's the thing that'll get you through the most, I think. So,
Anyone else? Okay. You answered all the questions. They're all prepared. Thank you so much for your time, Josh.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for
Thanks for
coming.
having me,
Thank you.
Wendy. This is such an amazing festival.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Stacy. I really appreciate your time. So I just have a few reminders for tonight. So thank you all for getting up so early, coming out here, listening to Nisha and Josh talk about their careers. And tonight I just want